Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video I'm going to be running you through the entire sharpening process of the Tormek sharpening system. Hope you enjoy. So there's a couple of things that you're going to need to know here. If you have the original wheel, you will need to make sure that you have this jig here, which is the flattening jig. It's called the TT-50. If you don't have that, you're not going to get good results on that stone, in my opinion. And the other thing that you'll have is the square edge jig. You also need to make sure that you've gone through what the instruction says to set up the honing wheel. If you've got the leather one, you end up adding the oil that comes with it and then Tormek paste. I've started using Autosol as well. It's about the same. It's just some polishing honing compound. And you do need to make sure that that leather is moistened up with the oil and then add the paste onto it and just put a blade or something on it just to take the excess off, and then that's good to go. And if you have the diamond wheel instead of the original wheel here, well, you don't need to go through the very first step that I'm going to do here, which is squaring this off to the actual the rest. So let's jump in here, and the very first thing we've got to do is get the water in the system, because this system has this pull here which you adjust up and down so you can move it. When the wheel gets smaller, you can still keep it nice and close, because you want it up as close as it can get without touching, and that's going to make it have the optimal amount of water come around. So first of all, we need to fill this up with water and get this running until this stone has soaked up all the water at once, because it's a water stone. So this is our max fill line, that little ridge there. So what I'd like to do first is just fill this up to that line. You don't want to overshoot it, because then it'll spill out of this container, which is why the rubber mat's here, to catch any water. That's a Tormek rubber mat that is designed with this. There's also a swivel base that makes this process a little bit easier when we get to the honing, but you don't need that. So now we turn it on, and you can see I've just lifted it up slightly more, and that's going to soak the water. You can already see that water level going down fast. When you do any operation with the Tormek, you want this sitting at its max level. So you can see, as water stones do, it's very, very thirsty, and it's sucking in an incredible amount of water to start with. So you just want to let it do that, let it spin, let it keep going. Now, just on another note, when you turn this machine off, if you're just quickly doing some adjustments, that's fine, but don't leave it sitting in there for any long period of time in that water. Drop the container down. There's a little knob on the front here that drops it down. You just want to make sure you drop that down off the wheel. If you're with the diamonds, I don't think it matters, but with these particular stones, don't leave it sitting in the water. So you can see that's just gone dry. Now, in the past, I've had this thing take up, I think it was about 4 litres of water one time, and that had been, I think that might have been when I very first used it. It sucked up a lot of water. Generally, I find a couple of litres of water is enough for it to get it fully saturated most of the time. So now I'm just going to turn that off. If it needs a little more water, I can put it in there later. So you want to grab your TT5 flattening jig, and it goes on, you can see this slotted part, so it goes on this way round. So when I bring that across, it's just scraping the surface, and that's the alignment this is designed in. So you slide it on there, lock it in place. Just here, these two little bits, they locate on this first arm of the rest. Then what you want to do is use that micro adjustment here. Have it so it's barely touching the stone. We'll adjust it in use, because what I want to do here is have it just sort of skim touch the surface and give us a nice clean surface. So I want to give it a clean square surface with removing as minimal the amount of material as possible. So that's what we're looking for here. What we want to do is now lock these wheels on the back here that hold this in place. And one thing to note, when you actually do this, you want to make sure you push down so this micro adjustment collar here is fully down, because sometimes it gets a little stuck and that could throw you out. So before we turn this on, we want to roll this off so it's not touching the wheel. So you can see just in here it's off the wheel, and you always want to turn this on with it not on the wheel. So now we turn it on, give it a second, it comes straight into correct speed. Now we want to grasp these and we want to roll it towards like this, so you can hear we're not engaging. So I want to unlock these two wheels here. We have the micro adjustment collar here, and it's got 1 through 6 here, and we want to turn it towards the larger number, and that's going to adjust it. So you can just go 1/6 of a turn at a time. I've just gone from the number 6 here across onto the 2, and now I'm going to come in again, and hopefully we can hear that we've clipped the surface. So now you just want to turn these wheels and just keep constant movement, and you can hear that it's getting louder, so it's engaging on the stone more, because this stone is clearly not flat and has had some issues So what I was trying to say there is, as it came across the surface there, you could hear it got a little louder, which means it was engaging the surface more. Now we've still got all these, if I turn this off for a second, we've still got all these dirt marks where it's been grazed in, so what I want to do is try to remove that, because that's damage to the surface in my opinion, at least in my experience. So we're going to turn this back on, loosen those wheels, turn this collar, I think another 2 times. So I've gone from the 2 round to the 4, and I'm going to come back the other way. So you can see we've got a nice clean stone here now. So if I turn that off, it's nice and clean. But what I'm going to do is just come back once more the other way, because it's still engaging. I like to do this every time I sharpen, knowing that it's nice, flat, square and good to go. If I did something the last time I used it and damaged it or put it slightly out of flat, this just zeroes you back to flat every time. Do you need to? No, but I find you get a better sharpening and you know that you're at sort of 0 and flat every time that you start. But we can go ahead and take this off now. Now, one thing we have to do now is clean out our water tray, because what's happened is all of the stuff that's come off the stone, all of the grit, has gone into our water dish, and we don't want that water coming on the stone while we're sharpening, because it could throw everything out. So what you want to do is take the dish off. You simply get this knob, turn it so it goes all the way down, and then you grab it here and it just slides off. Now, another thing to note with this is that you have this little scraper built in here, and it's got a magnet in it, and so any metal filings that is actually caught in anything, and I've actually caught some here, so there were some metal filings embedded in my stone, and that's why it's important to clear it out. So that holds all the metal filings when you're sharpening your tools, and then when you get it out, you can just grab that, and that's so the metal filings don't come running back around the stone and get embedded in it, or hopefully less chance of that. So let me just quickly go empty this out. I'll get it filled up with water again, and I'll be back here with you once I've got it ready to go again. After you've emptied that out, you don't need as much water because the stone's already sucked the water up. So we have this piece here which lives just on the bottom here. Now that's vital that you put that on first, over here, and just lock it in place for the moment. Then we want to grab this little threaded screw that lives here, and we want to make sure this side goes in. So this side, that large piece. So we slide that over, and you can see that it comes over the top of this. Now, we're going to adjust this when our blade's in here, and that's a stop. And we've got the other little threaded piece here that came out of that side that I showed you, and that screws right in the very end. So now we can see we've got 2 stops. So let's just turn this off for a minute and look a little closer at this jig. So what I've got here is we've got these 2 big knobs and these 2 little ones. These 2 adjust a little rock in this piece here, which allows you to twist it and give a camber to it when you're in operation. And to ensure that they're in the flat alignment, there's two little raised bits there, and you want them to be dead aligned. And sometimes there's a little micro adjustment there with a little tiny twist on these, just to make sure it's not rocking at all when you're in operation. I've already done that. It comes, or it did, my one did, comes with that already sitting dead flat, so that was no problem for me. So we have this knob, which actually you can see slides. Now this has got a little spring in it to keep tension on it when it's set, and it slides back and forwards, and you adjust that based on where your blade sits, so you bring it nice and close. So if you're using a, say this chisel, and it's pushed up against the square edge jig just on the side here, you'll bring it right over as close as you can to get better clamping pressure. Likewise, if you got it wider, you'll set it out wider. And if you're doing a camber, you have a little central alignment piece here, and you would align it in the center, so you would just adjust that. That brings me to this. So you can push the chisel, as you see here, right up against that little notch, and that's going to keep it square to that particular side of the chisel. Now, if you're like me, and I use this mainly for reprofiling my blades, and then I use the Veritas honing jig, which I know a lot of you have. Well, the fence on this comes in from the other side, and so if you're squaring off this side, you can't do that. So what you'll need to do is move it off that stop and use a square off this top piece here, which I've done a number of times, and that squares it up pretty close to the Veritas honing jig, and I haven't seen or had too many issues with that. The other option is you could try and use the fence on the Veritas jig the opposite way around, but I've attempted that and it doesn't really work. So yeah, so if you are using that, just bear in mind that that's going to be squaring off the wrong side. So if you are using other equipment to square different jigs, you might need to adjust where you're squaring that. But for today, we're using just the Tormek system, so we can push it up against that. Now, if you are using vintage chisels like these, or chisels that don't have the sides square, you might not end up with a square bevel across here, and it's going to look a little canted to you. So that's just something to bear in mind, and to be honest, it's kind of more just a visual thing than any real issue, but I know we like to see nice square across bevels, so yeah, that's something else that you might need to adjust, and you might need to adjust where it sits if you want it looking nice and square. But yeah, not all of them are like that, but you could, on this jig, push it up against one side and actually create it square, but it's only ever going to be square off that one side that you've squared it to. So if the chisel's not parallel, which a lot of these vintage style ones might not be quite parallel, it might not look quite square across when you come to actually, or after you've sharpened it and you look at it. So that's just something to bear in mind. I know I'm rambling on here a little bit, but I think it's important to note. As I've done here, as I've pushed that chisel in, I've pushed it right up against, and I've just lightly done that one up so it grabs it. Now I want to bring the other one up on this side. So I want to loosen that and slide that up, so I'm going to get it right close to it. Now you just want to double check that. Now, if you've done this one up and you need to adjust it, you probably need to undo this one because it'll cam across on it. So it does like to slide a little bit, so you want to make sure that it's fully engaged, and just double check right up in here that on the front and back it's pushed up against it, which on mine it doesn't want to do just correct. So I'm just going to loosen it and hold it there again and try that process once more. So now it's pushed up on the stop. Can you see there? And on the back, just there. That's what you want. So now let's go ahead, put it on the machine. Slide it on as we had it before. Don't worry about too much at the moment. Just put that little knob back in on the edge of your bar and let it rest. So we can see that this is going to be way too high. So if we look in here, this is way too high. It's just touching the tip of the chisel, so we need to adjust it and set our angle. Now the jig comes with this little adjustment thing here, which looks a little bit confusing at first. You've got these ones around the top here where you judge the angle of the chisel or what the bevel actually is. So if you want to match what's already on there, or if you want to set it to something specifically, you'll adjust this little gauge here. Now I normally set everything to 30, so I've already got this set to 30, and I'll just show you down there in a minute. This little guide here adjusts where this rests when you're actually using it, and that's based off the size of the circle of the wheel. So as it wears down, you want to adjust this to make that angle accurate. So you'll see this here. So you can see mine's still pretty much at full size, so I'm not too worried about it if it's out by a couple of degrees. But this will show you, and so you'll adjust that on the jig, so when it gets down to 140, you'll make it smaller and adjust it. So it's all thought about, and this will make your settling of the angles accurate via that jig. So I've just put you round on the side here, just so you have some idea. So you can see that the tip of that chisel is touching. So before I even think about putting that jig there, I'm going to adjust all of this and get it to drop until the main part of my bevel. I already know that this one's at 30 degrees, so I'm just going to drop it down before I put the jig on there. I'm just adjusting the micro adjustment wheel to bring it down in small increments until I can see the whole thing touching, which is about now. So I'm just going to briefly lock that there, and we'll micro adjust it now with this. So what you want to do is bring it on here, and the idea is whatever angle you've set, you want this to sit flat on the back of the chisel. So this is where our micro adjustment goes. So that little piece for the wheel sits there. This little piece touches the back of the chisel and gets our reading straight off the back of the chisel. Now I'm going to move my micro adjustment wheel until that sits flat. But I'm not sure if you can see that. I hope you can. But this piece is now sitting dead flat. Now it helps to look across the side of it. So if you look across, you'll see light under it and you'll be able to match that perfectly. Sometimes I sit it here. You can see it's actually worn a little bit of it off. So I like a little bit of engagement on the stone and the flat there. And I found that gives me my best results. So now we've got that set. Over this side where the micro adjustment wheel is, you want to push that down, lock that in place. Before we go too much further here, we want to make sure that we're not going to slide right off the stone, and you can see that's fine. Where this is set, it's going to come there and it won't pop off it, and it won't pop off that side. It doesn't matter if it goes off the edge of the stone a little bit, because that's actually a good thing, because if you don't, then you're going to get the stone building up larger here, and this just allows the whole thing to stay flatter by ensuring that you do go off the edge. It's not going to damage it and just really sharpen a little bit more there, because you're just going to constantly be moving it back and forwards. If we want to have a look at that bevel, we can simply undo the little screw on the side, take it off, look at it, put it back on. Angles are all going to be they're all going to be fine. They're all going to be in the same spot. The only thing is there might be a little bit of change in the length of the chisel as we wear it off, but that's not a problem. We're just going to keep with whatever it happens to be, because there'll be micro or minute adjustments, and that happens with any sharpening system as you wear a little bit of metal away. So now we want to lift that chisel up. You can see that I've put some permanent marker on that, and we want to turn the system on. Lift our water up, and you can see here it's very slow speed with water on it, so I can touch it here and it moves the wheel towards the cutting edge, towards. And what that's doing is, you can see there's water sitting on the surface. It's very slow, so it's not going to wreck your temper, and the water's going to keep the tool cool. Now, it does move towards it on purpose. You can, however, set it up on the front here and come the other way with certain tools like your gouges and stuff. With straight edge blades, on the top is so much easier, but you could sharpen it from here if that's what you really want to, and then move from that, flip it over and run to this. But I don't tend to use the fence on the strop here, but you can do. So let's do a little bit of sharpening here. So we want to set it down. Now I'm putting very little pressure down on this. I've just got my fingers here just to keep a little bit of very light pressure, and then you just let the whole jig do its work. So let's just take this off and have a look, and we can see that that's hit right on it. So my angle was bang on. Yeah, the whole bevel's not, and you could grind that entire bevel out so you've got a concave grind on the whole thing, or you could run with it like that. It's essentially looking like a micro bevel here at this point. So what I might do is just run through, because I'm not a big fan of micro bevels, although every time you sharpen this more and more that would disappear. It's up to you if that's what you want to run with, or whether you want to give the entire concave grind. So for this demo I'm actually just going to run through, get that entire bevel done, and then I'll show you the next step. Now another thing to note, this is sitting up quite high for me, and that's why my normal sharpening system or bench is over there and it's much lower, and that means I can get over the top of it better. But to show this to you, obviously I've put it up here on the workbench, and probably need a little stool to get up a little higher, but I might hit the roof, so I haven't done that. So just note that if it's a little bit lower, or your workbench is a little bit lower so you can get over the top of it a little bit more, you get a better view and it's just going to work a little bit better. There we go, I've done the bevel. Now we don't want to take that out of the jig yet, we want to go to our grading stone. Now this grading stone comes with it, and it uses it to switch the grit from, I think the coarse one, if you've used this after you reflattened it, I believe was 600 and the other side was 1000 or 1200. I'll put it on screen because I'll have to read the booklet. It's been a little while since I've used the grading stone because I don't tend to use it. So we're going to go ahead and use the fine side of the grading stone now. And the idea is we're going to take this from whatever it was from just the reprofiling of the stone, quite coarse, I reckon probably around 300. And we're going to take it down to the 600 and put it on there and smooth that bevel out. Now do note, the book doesn't suggest that you use it straight off after using the flattening jig, but I've found that it just works better, it's faster, and I've had no issues with it. And so yeah, generally they tell you to put the coarse side of this on first before you do it, but I like the faster process of doing it this way, so you can do either. So let me show you how we use this to change the grit of this stone. You can either bring it in this way or this way. I prefer this way because you can hold it with two hands. And I literally just hold it against it like that, let it spin around a little bit. Once it stops resisting, you know you got the grit about right. Pushes my hands back a little bit. And it actually feels smoother to the touch as well. We're just going to go until we see that that grit pattern's changed on there. Same process. And you can also hear the difference. It's much finer. It's not making the same sort of sound. It is way less noisy because it's just not hogging off as much material. Now I find this doesn't take long, this step. I can still see a few other larger scratch marks, so I'm just going to put it back on there just for a few more seconds, probably another 30 seconds. And you can also feel a little burr on the back here, but this machine doesn't tend to create too much of a burr, which is interesting. I believe it's because it's moving towards the cutting edge, it kind of takes the burr with it. Now we can see that that scratch pattern's changed. Hopefully you can see it there and it's not washed out. So now we've got the final step. We can turn this machine off for a second and drop our water down. We no longer need the sharpening stone. We now want to be looking at, yes, our strop here. Now, if I turn this back on, you can see that it's moving towards me, and if I was to jam the blade in like this, it's going to dig in. So you have to do it from this side. So what I have to do is turn this machine around or walk on the other side. So I've now got this turned around. Now, you can take this fence out and put it here and use it on the strop. I just don't find the need for it. I just find it's easier to freehand it, so we're going to take our chisel out of our jig for this part. I just roughly know where my bevel is, and then I just bring it in like this and go, I'm going to touch it here. and just move it back and forwards. If you feel like it's not making full contact with the bevel, you can kind of just move it around a little bit, but ideally you just want to keep it flat against it. And I'm just more looking for contact on the front part of the bevel here. The rest of the bevel doesn't really matter too much. Since I re-put the honing paste on here, a little bit of it's sticking to it, but you can see that it's starting to shine up a little bit. We can go a little bit more. If you do take a little bit of extra time to do that, you can get the entire bevel polished, but there's really not much point. It's only the very cutting edge, and so that's good enough. Now, to do the top, or the back of it rather, you want to come to the top of the wheel and just touch the edge of it. Feel for that burr, then come back this way, and we've actually removed the burr, and all you're doing on that top part is just getting the strop to just catch it and just pull the burr off. And then I flipped it over once just to make sure the burr wasn't on the other side, and you can do it on this, but I prefer usually with this, because I have a flat strop lying around, is to just do that bit on a flat strop just to ensure it all stays flat instead of it maybe changing the angle slightly. I'm just a little worried that it might do that, although it is designed and you can do it the way that I just showed you. I just wanted to give you the option, but I think a flat strop's better for that. So the best test here is obviously to take this to a piece of wood and see what it does. If you're doing a quick look, grab a light above and look down on the top. If there's no light shining back at you, you know you've got that nice and sharp on the two surfaces. And obviously this is just for sharpening the bevel, this machine. You can't really flatten the back. You can use the side of the stone, apparently. I've tried that. I didn't have much success with it. I think you're better with a flat stone flattening the back of them. And you only have to do it really that very first time. So after that, there's no real issues. So I really wouldn't use the side of your stone for that. Although you can get jigs and everything to do that. And that might be better saved if you've got a diamond stone and not these style of adjustable stones. Because I think with the diamond stones, you're going to have more than one of them for the different grits. You can't adjust the grits on the diamond stones that come with these. And so that's why I like this stone. You can adjust it, you can do it all. And it's the one that came with it. And the diamond stones are quite expensive. So I'm definitely going to use the stone that came with it first. So let me clear a little bit out of the way. We'll jump down to the vise here with a piece of pine. And we'll see how sharp this chisel is now. And you can also see that that bevel is very square. This was the side. And you know, it might be ever so slightly out of square, or that could be my square. But if it is, it's a fraction of a millimeter. I've got this rough piece of scrap construction pine here. Let's see. I'm going against the grain here. Let me just turn it around. I'm just going to show you with some long grain on this piece. Going against the grain. Against the grain, it's just tearing it out, and you can see that this is just ripping it apart, and it's also doing very little fine shavings as well. So I think it's safe to say, folks, that that is now sharp and can do every process you want. Obviously you can refine them and get them a little bit finer and smoother on other stones, which is why I choose just to mainly use this to reprofile and then jump over to my stones, because I just prefer to do it that way, and I prefer the flat surface on it rather than concave, But if you do use a round wheel and get that concave on there, it does mean that you can use that as a double point for hand sharpening as well, and it does make it a little easier for you practicing your freehand sharpening because you can find 2 points. So if you like this video, please do like and subscribe down below. And while you're down there, do sound off in the comments whether you own a Tormek. Have you had issues with the Tormek? Do leave any of your issues that you've had with the Tormek down below, and I'll try and answer them maybe in a video if there's enough questions. And if you'd like to see another great video such as this, do check out the video up here on the review for the Veritas honing jig. Bye for now.